Previously on Up at Noon.
Alright, well, it looks like you screwed up last week. The UK store that stopped selling the Wii U is actually the Asda, not the ASDA, as you said. It's like the Walmart of the UK. The UK is like the America of the other side of the earth. Wow. Well, the earth is like...
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Up at Noon. Sorry to all those across the pond that I offended by never having heard of some retail store in some country IGN never sends me to. I expect you all to know about Buffalo Wild Wings, so I should know all about your places of worship, too. Want a badass show featuring a badass people doing badass things? I suggest Breaking Bad. I hear it's pretty good. But we have a good show on Up at Noon, too. Brian Altano is here to talk about the return of the NFL, and Dennis Dyack is here to explain why you should care about the Eternal Darkness spiritual successor, Shadow of the Eternals. But first, the news you care about. Rumor has it that Josh Brolin and Ryan Gosling are vying to be the Dark Knight in the new Batman vs. Superman movie. However, Lone Ranger star Armie Hammer has come out saying he has no interest in the part. Now, in related news, Josh Brolin and Ryan Gosling were actually asked about playing Batman, whereas Armie Hammer just decided to speak up, so right back off to Lone Ranger 2 where you belong, Armie Hammer. Nobody wants a complaining loser Batman. Oh, Lone Ranger. Yeah, just so bad. A never-before-seen pitch reel for a Legend of Zelda animated movie recently surfaced. Now, the project never saw the light of day, but if you're really starved for an animated film about a goofy guy with a heart of gold who needs to battle goofy baddies in order to save a princess from an evil villain, you could always watch literally any other animated film ever made. It's the same plot as Ants. It's all the same. This Wednesday, Activision will reveal Call of Duty Ghost multiplayer for the first time ever. However, we here at Up at Noon were able to convince them to give us 6 seconds to debut today. Are you ready? Yeah. Roll it! Was that really ghost footage? Was it a 2-year-old Call of Duty? Was it on the Xbox One? Maybe the PS3? Nobody knows. Because every Call of Duty, it's the same game. We're excited for it, but come on, man. Nintendo has partnered with the Chicago Transit Authority to decorate their L train line in order to celebrate the Year of Luigi. The train will be rebranded as the Luigi line, be covered in pictures of Luigi, feature a costume Luigi character riding it, and will be a constant, massive, 30-year-long disappointment. The BBC has officially unveiled the 12th Doctor Who. His name, Peter Capaldi. He is a famous British. He's been in some British things like. I don't know any of these, but I heard he was a scientist in the. He probably shops at ASDA or ASDA, as the locals call it. My point is, Doctor Who, more like Wake Me When It's in America. All right, like come on, USA, am I right? We gave the world the Twinkie and pizza, I think. Harrison Ford has expressed interest in returning for Indiana Jones 5. Unfortunately, audience have not expressed interest in seeing a 75-year-old man try to escape from a treasure cave. Shia LaBeouf, though. He'll be back. And finally, with football season kicking off in a few weeks, NFL fans everywhere are excited to see how much ass their favorite teams will kick. And what better way to keep track of your favorite team than by joining a fantasy football league? Here to tell us all about his own fantasy team is fantasy football fan Brian Altano. Brian!
Thanks, Greg. Unfortunately, my fantasy football team is looking a little rough around the fantasy edges this year.
So sorry to hear that. I mean, what's wrong, Brian?
Well, my fantasy all-star actually suffered a bit of a fantasy injury recently, so he's going to be on the fantasy bench for a few months. And I know you're thinking, Brian, how is that even fantasy possible? But when you're out with a fantasy team on a fantasy off night and a few fantasy prostitutes get a little too fantasy crazy in the fantasy champagne room, Down at the fantasy strip club, 5 fantasy drinks might turn to 25 fantasy drinks, and a little bit of fantasy nose candy, if you catch my drift. And before you fantasy know it, your fantasy quarterback is stumbling down the fantasy street, jingling his fantasy car keys, thinking he's fantasy sober enough to drive his fantasy Escalade to the fantasy Taco Bell for a fantasy beef chalupa, until a bunch of fantasy cops tackle his fantasy ass and he breaks his fantasy shoulder on his cold, hard streets of fantasy sobriety. Talk about a fantasy wake-up call, Greg. Luckily, his fantasy friend was there to help him. Her name was Fantasy. I'm pretty sure she's a stripper.
Holy shit, Brian, how is the rest of the team handling this?
Well, when the fantasy coach heard the fantasy news, he went on a fantasy tear through the fantasy locker room, fantasy punching and kicking every fantasy player in there. You should have fantasy heard it, Greg. He was like the next piece of fantasy player who even fantasy thinks he's going to get away with that kind of fantasy behavior on my fantasy team is mother fantasy kicked out of this god fantasy damn sport for the rest of his fantasy worthless life. It got fantasy bad in there. So now I'm down like 87 fantasy points. How the fantasy am I going to raise my team's fantasy stats high enough to fantasy win this thing?
Brian, this is completely insane. None of this stuff actually happens in fantasy football. This sounds more like a plot of a movie or a video game.
A video game. Like what, some dumb RPG where I have to sit around for months and track some fake character stats and attributes like some fat Final Fantasy nerd? I'll stick with the sports like a real fantasy man.
Brian Altano, everybody. He just broke the world record for saying the word fantasy. Speaking of fantasies, Greg Way, my next guest wants to make his fantasy game a reality, and he needs your help to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Shadow of the Eternals, Dennis Dyack. As I live and breathe, Dennis Dyack.
Greg, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great,
I
thanks.
tell you, we're stepping up on this show, getting the big name developers in here. For the kids at home who don't know you by name, which is a damn shame, who are you, Dennis? How do you explain your career to somebody?
Oh, geez, good question. Well, my name is Dennis
That's what I
Dyack.
do. I give good questions.
Yeah, excellent, the best ones. I'm the chief creative officer at a new company called Precursor Games. Mm-hmm. I founded Silicon Knights more than 20 years ago.
Right.
Led that company. And
did this game Eternal Darkness. A lot of people like that one.
Yeah.
One person over there. You did Twin Snakes, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes.
I did.
Huge fan
correct,
of that.
Correct.
You sold me a GameCube. Congratulations.
Oh, well,
I hope you got a cut of that somewhere along the way.
No, I wish I did.
Damn it.
I wish I did. Legacy of Kain as well. Created that one.
Right.
And we're doing a Kickstarter now for a spiritual successor to Eternal Darkness called Shadow of the Eternals.
Shadow of the Eternals. We have the Kickstarter going right now, about to expire. If you're watching this on Monday when we post, it's a week from that Friday, the 23rd, correct? August, I believe?
I think so.
August 23rd. That's why I bring pen and paper to these things. This has been an interesting ride on this game specifically, let alone your entire career. Bring me up to speed here. You originally started a Kickstarter for this. And you actually started crowdfunding on your site, then did a Kickstarter, then suspended it, and now it's back.
Right.
What happened?
Well, many things. A lot of good things happened, and we learned a lot of lessons. So I'll talk about the good things.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about lessons eventually too.
Yeah, of course. We'll talk
I'm only talking about the good things.
We won't say anything negative at all. That's fine. Because everything's perfect. During the campaign, one of the things that started to happen is our community really started to grow. And for those who don't know, we have this thing called the Order of the Unseen, where not only are we doing this through Kickstarter, but if you join and commit our pledge to the game, you can actually create content in the game. So a lot of these people in the Order started making suggestions that were really making sense, so we learned a ton from that. And one of them, as an example, everyone kept saying, Dennis, you know David Hayter, you should call David Hayter up. Right. And we did, and one of the big announcements for the campaign is David Hayter's joined us. And he's amazing, worked with him on Eternal Darkness, on the Metal Gear stuff. And he's a great actor, he's done so many great things. Of course, accomplished screenwriter. He's written some of my favorite movies. Watchmen.
X2.
Yeah, he did a great job.
You guys know David Hayter, right? Yeah. I haven't trained the audience to clap yet when they hear a name they know. So we get that awkward like, oh, what's your name?
He's awesome. He's such a great guy.
He's an Up at Noon alum, you know.
Yes.
You brought a special message for the audience from him.
That's correct. That's correct.
Can we please play that?
Hey guys, this is David Hayter. First of all, I want to say how sorry I am that I was not able to be there for this particular broadcast over at IGN, to be on Up at Noon, possibly my favorite gaming show in the world, certainly one of the favorite interviews that I've ever done, primarily due to copious intake of Powers whiskey with Game Over Greggy. I just want to say how excited I am about Shadow of the Eternals and how honored I am to be playing the role of Paul Becker, who is a true badass, has an amazing story, and to follow this game which goes across all levels of history and through all levels of insanity. So I think you're really going to enjoy it, and I want to give a shout out to Dennis Dyack at Precursor Games and say that I wish I was there with you, buddy. But I just got back from Comic-Con, and I'm still recovering from overhuggage and possible liver damage. So, guys, have a great show. Game Over Greggy. I'm raising a Powers whiskey in your memory. I miss you lots. Hope to see you guys soon. Bye.
I like how he says memory like I'm dead. Right here, David. Well, that's a huge get. I'm glad that was able to happen.
Oh yeah. That was a great thing for I think the game and for the community. And other things that are going on too is when we first started, we were, it's a new company. We've never done anything like this before. We started on PayPal. And a lot of people were saying, no, we prefer Kickstarter. And so then we started a Kickstarter like the week after. And being a Canadian company, that took some time. We couldn't just say we're just going to do a Kickstarter like everyone else can. And so that was delayed by a week. And then what happened is we had our campaign split, so it made it look worse than what it really was. We ended up raising over $300,000 before we decided to stop. So that was certainly a lesson learned there. So now we're doing a pure Kickstarter first, and we have a bunch of other announcements. We refocused our tiers on what people were looking for. We got a lot of feedback on people saying, you're promising right now something for 2 hours because it was episodic. So we said, okay. We're not going to do that now. We're going to give you a full game for like 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah, that's what Kickstarter says.
It's been a roller coaster ride for sure. I think as well before we had a lot of messages because we were announcing a new company and then we're announcing a Kickstarter. This time we're just focusing on the Kickstarter and the game. So I think it seems to be going very, very well. I look at all the things that we're doing now and I compare it to some of every sort of game that I believe is going to do well. We kind of come to these sort of epiphanies and sort of for Eternal Darkness, we wanted to create a game where you played many characters over many different time periods, where a lot of characters died. We were kind of doing Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones. It was kind of fun.
Bastards.
We had a lot of red weddings. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I love Game of Thrones too. And also, of course, we started breaking the fourth wall with all the sanity effects and stuff like that.
That was a big deal. That was one of the big things for, I think, Eternal Darkness.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And, for Metal Gear, when we worked on Metal Gear Twin Snakes with Kojima-san and, of course, David and stuff, we really got a chance to learn about spectacle and stuff like that in cinemas, and that was really, really fun. And then when I look at Shadow of the Eternals now, I look at the order and where it's going, because we have all of these great technologies coming out now. So you have things like PS4, X1, Wii U, the PC stuff. Our relationship with AMD is going fantastic, and all these new hardware things come out, Oculus Rift. But where I see the big sort of epiphany for Shadow of the Eternals is working with the community. Within a few weeks of starting the community up now, we have, as an example, way over 300 to 400 sanity event suggestions.
Right.
During the creation of Eternal Darkness, which we worked on for years, we had 60 to 90 at most. And so the ability of us to come up with the number of things that we're going to do and the quality of them is going to be really, really through the roof. And I think when I look at things like the possibilities of this, I just see such potential. And what really, really sort of makes me think that we're going in the right direction, of course, is when you look at Dota. and the whole Dota genre, completely created by the community. It's one of the biggest multiplayer competitive things right now, and it didn't come from the developers. So, when we started Precursor Games, we started looking at all these things and saying, hey, there's something here. So with all this great hardware coming around, that's fantastic, but let's start using the wetware of the internet and the social interaction, and I think we can really do something special.
Do you see that being... is that the whole reason you went to Kickstarter and did this? Because you have this hardcore community. We put the article up on IGN today, right? Kickstarter's back up, and people in the comments, now granted, nobody's ever good in the comments, but people in the comments are talking about, well, after 2 Human and X-Men Destiny, I don't trust these guys anymore. But you have this group that still supports you. I mean, is that what your kind of MO, I guess, on this one is that we're going to go double down on the people who love us and hopefully win back these people that don't?
Well, at the end of the day, certainly, I've said this before, everyone makes mistakes. I don't think anyone's got a perfect track record out there in video games, and, I'm really sorry if we disappointed people with, X-Men Destiny or 2 Human. But certainly, I hope people look at that we've made a lot of great games, too. When it comes down to what we believe in, this has been a labor of love for us for over a year now. And it's come out of our own pockets. There's been no funding. This is something that we really, really want to do. And if you look at our Kickstarter, it's really it's comparable to a lot of the next generation console games coming out, and yet our budget is so much smaller. And I think that has potential to change things because right now, the AAA games that are really wonderful, and I think a lot of them are fantastic, they have these massive budgets and they have to sell 10 million copies to be successful. We do not.
Yeah.
What we want to do is create a game that's different and apart from the norm, where you can see what it's like to be around Elizabeth Bathory, who's one of the most prolific female serial killers, who bathed in the blood of virgins. Just my kind of
woman.
Yeah. Never mind putting up makeup in the morning. You get to bathe in blood, and see if you can stay eternally youthful. And and you play the role of her lover, Clara, who's being coerced by the police to find a nobleman's missing daughter. Those are some very interesting domestic disputes that I think people are going to get a chance to see, and that's different than what's out there right now. We want to create something that has notoriety for its content and its story, not just for the action and the spectacle, which we think has its place, but we want to do something that's different that's out there. And it's it's not that it's not a turn-based strategy role-playing game, which generally are very typical on Kickstarter. This is coming out on the consoles. If we hit our stretch goals, it'll be on PS3 and Wii U, PC, and whatever else we can get out there. But this is something I hope people embrace for what it is.
Kickstarter, of course, ends on August 23rd. I always say, tweet at me. I tweet who's on the show. You get to tweet in a question, just like MSU Hitman did. He says, so about that Kotaku expose on X-Men Legends, ... I want to bring this up. I'm sure a lot of people saw it. Up at Noon's pretty hardcore fan base.
Sure.
There was this Kotaku thing citing all these anonymous sources that worked with you on X-Men Destiny. I don't know why I said Legends. He doesn't even know what game he's talking about. But on X-Men Destiny, and how that there was this trouble and blah, blah. And it painted you personally as a not-so-nice guy.
Yeah.
And I've met you a bunch of times. Today you remembered me out of the blue. You're a nice guy.
Oh, thank you.
No
one's accused me of being nice before. Watch it.
No, I mean, I guess to whatever. I understand that everybody there is talking anonymously or whatever. If you can talk about what your reaction to that article was, or how truthful it was, or anything along those lines.
Well, sure. It's really, really strange because frankly, it's all anonymous, and my first reaction was, because there was no facts and it was a lot of personal attacks. Yeah, I didn't think anyone would take it seriously, but I was wrong.
Well, that's the internet.
Yeah, it was the internet and tweets and retweets and links, and it became very disappointing that somehow my persona got painted by that article. And so, all I can say is, I think if people contacted the majority of people, who I worked with over the years, and Silicon Knights was at 200 people, 8 people is a very, very small section. Most people would give you a very, very different picture of what it was.
They just got the wrong 8 people.
Well, it's the anonymous part is for me the part that I sort of look at it and just go, it's like fighting ghosts. And if one of the reasons we didn't come out and say anything right away too is because I'd be the first credible source in the whole article if I said anything. So it was unfortunate, but all I can say is the allegations were not true. I hope people can see that, certainly we've learned our lessons, and it's not to say we didn't make mistakes, because of course we made mistakes,
Sure.
and that's part of the I think lessons of being in the industry a long time, and I'm looking at, we are trying to do something special here. I hope people don't look at that and hope it doesn't taint their opinion of what happened, because it's just there's some random facts in there, but nothing that what I would say is reasonably accurate to what was going on at the time at all.
Sure.
So don't know what else to say besides.
No, I thought that was good. You did really good. That's the
Oh,
thing. Don't worry,
thanks,
you did
thanks.
fine. Like I said, he's a nice guy. And I don't mean people, Brian Altano. You check out. You check out. So, Shadow of Eternals, still kickstarting right now.
Yep.
Go donate some money to him. Dennis, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
You have
Take
fun.
care.
And that's our show, everybody. A huge thank you to ASDA, Brian Altano, Dennis Dyack, and you, my fantastic audience, all of you. If you want to be in that audience, go.ign.com/up@noon for details. As always, Brian and I will be responding to comments the first hour this video is live, so come kickstart our hearts. We'll be back next Monday with a mega show featuring The Bureau, XCOM Declassified, and Lord of the Rings, Dominic Monaghan, and Splinter Cell Blacklist, and Smallville's Eric Johnson. But until then, I'm going back to bed. Dave Fenoy.com.